As we've discussed many times before on this show, that mass importation of foreigners by virtually every Western leader, don't think this is only an American problem, but we'll focus on us because that's what I care about. Mass importation of foreigners is not something that happens accidentally, and it doesn't happen because your liberal Aunt Peggy just has a big heart. It is a very focused effort to fill up your country with people who will, at the drop of a hat, burn down Los Angeles. That's why we're seeing what we're seeing, and this has been done to us on purpose by the Democrat Party. Bill Jacobson's all kinds of fired up about all this stuff, joining me now, founder of Legal Insurrection and Cornell University law professor Bill Jacobson. Bill, it's not like an LA riot is some new thing. Those of us who've been alive longer than 15 minutes have seen it, but the waving of the Mexican flags, the throwing things at cops, it just chaps me.
Well, this is, in a sense, the sum of all our fears, that by bringing in tens of millions, and how many tens of millions, we don't know, of foreigners illegally into the country. We don't even know who these people are. We all saw the lines of military-age solo men crossing the Mexican border under Joe Biden, being welcomed into the country and bussed into the interior. When you do that, you are removing a fundamental aspect of sovereignty. The key aspect of sovereignty for any country is whether you can control your borders, whether you can control who comes into the country. And if you don't have a border, and I'm going to paraphrase Donald Trump from 2015, I was just looking at this the other day. 2015, he gave a speech in Phoenix during his campaign, and he said, if we don't have a border, we don't have a country. And that's really what it is. What the fight is going on is not over a particular piece of block in LA. It's over whether we have a country. And the Democrats and the governor of California don't want us to have a country. They want it to be a free-for-all. And mostly the Republicans and the Trump administration want us to have a country. And that's what this fight is over. This is not just about some esoteric notion of immigration law. This is very much about whether we are a sovereign nation anymore or not.
Bill, I'm going to ask a question that I don't want to ask because I'm afraid of your answer, but do we have a country still? A unified 50 states, United States? It's not as if, I don't know there are going to be differences in parties. There are always differences in political parties, but when you have blue states, blue areas, including our largest, most powerful state, California, that have declared themselves to be a haven for foreign criminals, do we still have a country?
Well, I think we do have a country, but it's on the precipice. I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that. And it's been something that's been building for 30 years. If you look at what they've done to the education system, where students from kindergarten are indoctrinated into believing we are uniquely evil in the world. The United States is uniquely evil in the world. When you bring in people from countries who are hostile to us, when you do all of these things, you're trying to tear apart the country. If you wanted to destroy the United States, what would you do differently than the left has done for 30 to 40 years? So do we have a country? We still do, because we currently have an administration that's committed to it. But if Kamala Harris had been the president, I don't think we would. We could not stand 4 more years of a Biden administration flying people into our country. 500,000 people from South and Central America were flown here by the Biden administration. Completely open borders where people are bussed to the interior. So do we have a country? Yeah, but we're hanging on, by our fingernails. And the next 2 to 3 years is going to determine what the future of this country is to a much greater extent than I think anybody predicted. Illegal immigration has been a hot topic for as long as I can remember. But it went into hyperdrive under the Biden administration. It became destructive to an extent we've never seen before. And they're fighting it even now. They're fighting. Democrat senators like that guy from Maryland, Van Hollen, are fighting to keep criminals in the country. they're fighting to prevent the Trump administration from deporting people who have been convicted or credibly accused of crimes and who are here illegally. So, yeah, we have a country, but we can't take it for granted. Whether the Trump administration is successful or not in its immigration push will determine the future of this country.
Bill, what can look? Everyone's talking about the Marines being sent in here and Marines being sent in there. I realize there are legal things you can do as president, especially when it comes to the military, and things you cannot do. So that's your area, most definitely not mine. What can you do? Can you just send the Marines into the streets? What can you do?
Well, you certainly can do what Trump has done so far, which is federalize the National Guard, and you can send in the military to protect federal assets and federal personnel. You can't have the military engage in routine policing, routine policy enforcement, things like that. But he has the authority to do what he did very clearly by statute, and it's inherent in the executive power under Article 2 to make sure that the laws are faithfully executed. And he has the right to protect federal property and to protect civil rights and things like that. He can't start running LA, not that he would want to. He can't impose a military administration on the city of Los Angeles and run it day to day, but he sure can protect federal assets and ICE members from being lynched by mobs running rampant in the street.
Okay, as far as the immigration deportation efforts go, you just mentioned how critical it is, and obviously I agree with you 100%. Where is the Supreme Court in all this? To say they've been disappointing over the first 6 months of Trump's presidency would be putting it unbelievably mildly, but where are they in all this?
Well, they haven't really been anywhere so far. They have issued a couple of preliminary rulings and stay rulings on specific individuals when Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act. But that's not really what's at stake in Los Angeles. So the Supreme Court's weighed in a little bit, but they may be coming up upon the biggest decision, I believe, that they'll ever have to make. If a district court judge in San Francisco grants the state of California's request to issue an injunction against Donald Trump nationalizing the National Guard and sending in troops to protect federal assets. If the judge does that, there's going to be a real crisis here, and I would expect the Supreme Court to step in. I'm not convinced the judge is going to do this. Oddly enough, if you had to pick a judge in San Francisco, you probably got one who is more on the more moderate side. He's actually kind of, interesting quirk here. He's the brother of former Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. So Judge Breyer in the district court in San Francisco is the brother of the former Supreme Court justice. He's not known, I don't know him very well, but from what I've read, he's not known for being one of these judges we worry about. And he didn't do what they wanted. They wanted one of these emergency orders like they've gotten in many places around the country without a basis. They wanted him on an hour's notice to issue the injunction, and he wouldn't do it. He said, I'm going to give the government time to put in their papers. They just put in their papers about 10 minutes ago, and he's going to hold a hearing. He's doing it the way judges should be doing things, not the way judges in many places have been doing things. So where is the Supreme Court? They're going to have to get involved if a judge enjoins the president of the United States, or I should say the executive branch of the United States, from exercising their control over the military. That would be a very serious and unprecedented, circumstance. And then we'll find out where the Supreme Court is on all these things.
Where are we at on birthright citizenship?
Well, that's going to be coming up soon for decision by the Supreme Court. And I don't know how they're going to rule. My gut tells me they're going to not rock the boat. They are not going to want another situation like they encountered after they rejected Roe v. Wade, where lunatics are literally at their doorstep with guns, incited by Democrats, where their homes are protested. So I don't know if they're going to have the guts to rule what I believe is probably the right way. There is a very good argument that the way we have treated birthright citizenship, that any woman who sets foot on our territory and then gives birth, that child is a citizen, even if the woman's here illegally, even if she's here temporarily, even if she's passing through, changing planes at LAX, that person is now a citizen. I don't think that's the history of the 14th Amendment. And I don't know, though, if the court will have the guts to make that ruling. But we're going to find out. That would be the single biggest ruling to solve our immigration problem if citizenship were to be denied to people who merely by circumstance happen to be born on our territory. That would remove a lot of the incentive that the Democrats have to allow in unfettered illegal immigration. Because remember, even if the illegal immigrants themselves do not become citizens, their children do. So that is part of the Democrat goal. I'm old enough to remember when the Democrats were touting the concept that demography is destiny. And they viewed demography as favoring them, and they encouraged it. So I think the Supreme Court, I hope they have the guts to do it. I don't think they will, but I hope they have the guts to rule that birthright citizenship is not the way it's been handled the last century, and that that would have a huge impact on the incentives people have to come to this country.
How's things on college campus? We getting better on college campus anywhere?
I think in many ways we are on the surface. This past year, the encampments and the other, hooliganism were much more tame than a year ago. But I don't think that is anything more than a superficial change. I don't think the ideological corruption of our campuses has changed. That's too deeply embedded. That's a generational effort, or at least it's a multi-year effort. The first thing they did on most campuses, not all of them, but on most campuses, was clamp down on the hooliganism and clamp down on the intimidation that was taking place on campuses. So superficially, most campuses are better than they were a year ago. But unless we change the culture on campuses, unless we change the faculty on campuses, unless we get the faculty on campuses back to where they were 30 or 40 years ago, professors identified roughly 60-40 liberal to conservative, which it makes sense. Academia has always leaned left. Now, the latest statistics are it's almost 30-1 liberal to conservative. The campuses have been completely purged of conservatives, or almost completely purged of conservatives. Those who are still there, like me, are hanging on, but they're not getting hired. So through attrition, through lack of hiring, there's been a purge of conservatives. And this is relevant to what's been happening on the campuses. There's also been a purge of pro-Israel faculty. It is close to impossible to get hired in the humanities and social sciences if you are either openly conservative or openly pro-Israel. And therefore, the universities cannot reform themselves. This is a point I make all the time. They cannot reform themselves because there is no internal opposition left on campuses. They have been purged through either firing or, more likely, through not hiring. And therefore, outside pressure, the sort of pressure the Trump administration is bringing, is the only way anything is going to change. There's no guarantee that will change things, but you cannot say, oh, Harvard will cure itself. No, it won't. You can't say that Cornell or Columbia or any of these places will reform themselves without outside pressure. They won't, because it's a monoculture, and that's something that we've got to address.
Bill, thank you. As always, I appreciate you. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.